Trainees are paramount with regards to research design, funding and delivery.
So my name's Louise Hitchman, I'm a vascular registrar based in Yorkshire.
My name is Thanos Soratzis. I'm an NIHR research professor of vascular surgery, and I'm a vascular surgeon obviously, and I'm based in Leicester.
And so we're just going to talk about how trainees can get more involved in research. So from your experience and from your knowledge, how do you think the trainees could be more involved in research?
Well, first of all, trainees are paramount with regards to research design, funding and delivery. So it's not just about delivering their whatever trial or whatever applied research project we've got going. I think trainees should get involved in designing the studies and probably should be co-applicants in as many studies as possible, because then that makes things a lot easier with regards to how you disseminate findings and how you actually deliver the subsequent funded project. So I would urge everyone to get involved in as many projects as they can very early on in the process. And to do that, you just need to speak to your consultant colleagues or get in touch with networks like VERN, for example. Or you can go into the Vascular Society website and look at what's happening in terms of upcoming projects. So that's the sort of getting involved in the early stages of research. Then delivery is really, really important. We have got dozens of trials now and big projects across the UK, many of which are struggling in terms of getting the right number of patients in. And I think that's where trainees can really help. So how do you do that? The NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Research and funds many of these studies, has got something called the NIHR Associate PI scheme, which means that a trainee, like a registrar in vascular surgery or radiology or other healthcare professions, can become the local primary investigator for any study funded by the NIHR. And that means that for a period of 6 months, they can help recruit patients, collect a bit of data and work with the main primary investigator. And they'll be supervised, and people like myself and other chief investigators can help those trainees deliver the studies. It's a great learning process and it helps the greater cause of delivering all of those studies. And most importantly, if you are an API, so if you are an NIHR Associate PI, you'll be named on the subsequent outputs of these studies. And these are big papers that they get into proper big journals. So that's a great thing for your CV. But for me, the nicest thing about this process is the fact that you learn about research and you learn about the barriers and the enablers of research, and that might help with your future career, especially if you've got a bit of an academic interest. And the final thing to say, outside the NIHR Associate PI scheme, I think research delivery is everyone's duty. So please, if you haven't got any studies open at your site, you can go on the Vascular Society website or the Vascular Research UK website, and you can look up the studies that are now taking place in the UK, and you can convince your consultant colleagues, either in radiology or vascular surgery, etc., to actually open one of those studies, and you can be the API or you can lead on study delivery in some other capacity.
Thank you. So if you're at the start of your research career and you've never taken part in any research before, what do you think the first thing you should do is to become involved?
Couple of things. I would go on the VERN website. That's the Vascular and Endovascular Research Network website. And I would look at the ongoing trainee-led projects up and down the country, because these are very straightforward projects to deliver. They're mostly things like surveys or audits or quality improvement projects, and taking part in these is pretty simple. And then you can visit the Vascular Society website and the Vascular Research UK website, and you can look at the slightly more complex studies that are currently taking place in the UK. But I would most definitely start from VERN and then see how you can expand your interest.
Yeah, great. And VERN is a great collaborative for all trainees to take part of, not just trainees, but associated health professionals as well,
Absolutely.
and medical students.
Yeah.
I agree. And you talked about the API scheme. You talked about how to get people, how to open up these studies in your centres by talking to consultants. Can you just elaborate a bit more? If you're in a centre that isn't research active, maybe some of the steps that you might go through if you're a trainee and you want to contribute to this research?
Yes. So that's why I said a great resource might be the Vascular Research UK web page, where you can find the names of the trials and who the chief investigator for each trial is. And people like Dan Carradine, myself, various other active academic vascular surgeons are leading many of these studies, and we're very happy to help trainees navigate through the bureaucracy. So if you get in touch with people like us, we can then reach out and say, this is what you need to do, this is who you need to get in contact with, and that's how you get set up as an NIHR associate PI. We're always happy to help, and you can find who we are and where we are on these websites.
Brilliant, yeah. And lots of trainees are a little bit worried about getting their research competences signed off during their training.
Yeah.
Can you speak about how maybe taking part in VERN or the Associate PI scheme would help you to meet those competencies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first and most basic thing that you have to do is your good clinical practice training. You can do that online. It takes something like half an hour, and it's the first step in terms of ticking some of the boxes that you need to tick in order to be able to recruit in studies. And when you do your GCP training, your good clinical practice training, practically you do learn quite a few things about the ins and outs of how you design and you deliver research in this country. So that's where I would start. Reach out to VERN through their website, and then ask your senior colleagues locally in terms of GCP training. Because once you start doing your GCP training, you get a better idea of the whole system. And again, the chief investigators of all of the studies are very happy to be contacted about things like that, GCP training and getting your competencies checked. Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah. And then lots of people think maybe you could be part of the API or VERN to get some of your competencies. And some people will say you need to do a PhD or an MD during your training to get your research competencies. What's your opinion on that?
That's definitely not true. Those who are a bit more academic minded, okay, a PhD, that's fantastic. You do learn a lot, and actually you do change as an individual, if you like, I would say in a positive way. But it's not necessary to complete an MD or a PhD for someone to be a competent vascular surgeon providing high quality services to patients and society. And yeah, if you want to get involved in research, you don't necessarily need those higher degrees or this protected time. And that's why things like the NIHR API scheme are there. And that's why VERN was set up by some of us about 10 years ago now, so that we can deliver some simpler projects which are actually making an important impact on patient care.
And we've talked about the API scheme for trainees to get involved in. We've talked about the VERN. We've talked about talking to the chief investigators of these big trials to get involved. And if you're in a centre that is a bit research naive, is there any other ways that you can think maybe a trainee can get involved without doing something that takes a lot of time and effort like an MD or a PhD?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the better or the best starting point would always be the API scheme, VERN, and looking into whether you can set up a trial or some form of study at your site, even if your site has never done this before. Because mind you, in the UK, we've got one unified healthcare provider, that's the NHS. And when it comes to vascular surgery, it's predominantly secondary care driven. And there's a national system that can support research delivery. It's not that much about the site. There's actually a national system that can support all of the sites. So if you do want to open any form of trial anywhere in the NHS, it's the national system that matters, actually. So you can go to your bosses, even in a research naive site, and try and convince them to open a study, because always you will find that there's a research and innovation or research and development department in every NHS trust, and they know how to set up studies, even if they've never done that before in vascular surgery. And finally, the VERN projects are mostly quality improvement projects or surveys, etc. So you don't need to go through all of this paperwork to set up your project. Final thing to say, by the way, there are other ways like doing a systematic review or getting involved in some form of national survey. So that kind of thing that you can do as a trainee.
So there are loads of opportunities for trainees to be involved in research.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the API screen, we've talked about VERN, we've said Vascular Research UK is a great resource to go to find out what studies are currently open, who the chief investigator is, and therefore how you can open up these studies in your centre to help get those trainees.
Absolutely.
Their research completely signed off.
Yeah.
And then last thing, you spoke at the start about research delivery, and there is sort of this urgency for more people to take part in the delivery of research. Can you just sort of describe to trainees a bit more what we mean when we say research delivery at the moment?
Yeah, so when you've funded a big study, right, usually you'll have something like 20, 30, 40 sites. And when I say sites, I mean vascular centres recruiting into those studies. And delivery means recruiting the participants that the studies require in order to be powered to look at whether a hypothesis is true or not. And that's where we're really struggling, because the culture so far has probably not been right. I think we should be thinking about recruiting every single patient that we see in a clinic or on the ward in a vascular study, because at the end of the day, those vascular studies are addressing or answering the questions that we've got when we're doing a ward round or when we're doing a clinic, like, is treatment A better than treatment B for someone with claudication, right? So I think we need to start thinking about changing our culture and embedding what we call research delivery in our day-to-day behaviour. So during a ward round, for example, if you see someone who's got a certain condition and you're unsure about their treatment, I can guarantee you that there will be a study out there that's trying to answer your question. And that's what I mean by embedding this in your day-to-day thinking. If you have got a clinical question, look up the currently recruiting studies. There's most definitely a study that's trying to answer your question.
And all the NIHR portfolio studies have an associate API scheme, and they need trainees to take part to help recruit these studies. So not only are you benefiting your own portfolio, but actually the vascular community and patients a whole by taking part in these research delivery activities.
And at the end of the day, you're benefiting society. And mind you, this is why we all became doctors. I don't think we got into medicine in order to become billionaires, right? It is our duty to answer those questions and therefore benefit society.
So thank you so much for listening to this today, and thank you so much for joining us. If you want any more information about how to get more involved in research, go to the Vascular Research UK website, the VERN website, or check out the NIHR API scheme.